Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. So, new releases have been a little sparse recently, and I normally talk about the latest ones to make sure you're all up to date on the latest toys. But now, we're gonna have to thumb through the back catalog and see if there are any themes I missed out on, and as it turns out, we don't have to go far. Before Darkwing Blast, there was Power of the Elements, and in it was an update to a fan-favorite archetype that pushed the boundaries of both fusion summoning and FTKs. Premiering in the December 2011 side set Hidden Arsenal 5 Steel Swarm Invasion, Gemi-Knights are part of the second age of the dual terminal storyline, weathering assaults from the Laval until the, well, Steel Swarm Invasion forces them to put down their pacifist ways and take their fusion summoning game to the next level, a course of action that would grant them great power and would have some very unintended shit-all-flavored consequences down the line. But you're gonna have to wait for that episode of the History of Dual Terminal to get more into that. For now, let's check out these warriors of Pyrazine, see how these jewels shine together, then find some other vitamins and minerals to buff up our strategy. It's time to shine bright with Gemi-Knights. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what I do. Once we get to 50k, we'll be doing our next 5Ds video on Akiza, and every sub helps. Also, check out my Discord, where people have some unique solutions to terrible problems, and my Twitch, where you can watch me put all my lessons to the test live. And if you want to go that extra mile, join my Patreon, where you can get my videos early, help us reach these video milestones, and become part of the credits like these lovely people. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Gemi-Knights? Well, they're a series of Earth attribute monsters that you might think are mono-rock type given their flavor, but also incorporate Thunder, Pyro, Aqua, and even Fairy into their set list. And our goal is to make a variety of fusions using various component monsters to access a toolbox of effects. So, in that way, they're kinda like the spiritual successors to Heroes, if Heroes ever stopped getting support. And that comparison isn't just skin deep, cause we're also laden with a ton of normal monsters, so let's cover them real quick. Gemi-Knight Lapis is a level 3 rock monster with 1200 attack and 100 defense. Gemi-Knight Sapphire is a level 4 Aqua with 0 attack and 2100 defense. Gemi-Knight Tourmaline is a level 4 Thunder monster with 1600 attack and 1800 defense. And the one you're probably all familiar with, Gemi-Knight Garnet, a level 4 Pyro monster with 1900 attack and 0 defense. And you probably know them because they've basically become a part of the common Yu-Gi-Oh vernacular. Ever since DZeef began running it as the best possible card you could to facilitate brilliant fusion, cards that you need to play to enable an engine but you never want to draw into have been dubbed as Garnets. Oh, also we've got Gemi-Knight Crystal, a level 7 rock monster with 2450 attack and 1950 defense, but they'll never be relevant from this point on. Alright, now it's time to talk about some cards that'll have a bit more of an effect on your game plan. Gemi-Knight Lazuli is a level 1 rock monster with 600 attack and 100 defense, and if this card is sent to the grave by any card effect, you can target a normal monster in your grave and add that target to your hand. A pretty important piece of support to have in a fusion deck, as being sent to the grave as material for said summon counts as going to grave by an effect, and buying back your normal monsters means more material for more summons. But if you ever find yourself unable to fuse it away, you can just send it directly from your deck to the grave with an effect like Foolish Burial. So the verdict is in. Lazuli is pretty cooly. Gemi-Knight Obsidian is a level 3 rock monster with 1500 attack and 1200 defense, and if this card is sent from the hand to your grave, you can target a level 4 or lower normal monster in your grave and special summon that target. That makes Obsidian a bit more of a restricted version of Lazuli, but does have better benefits. Obsidian summons to the field instead of adding to the hand, so they can increase your board presence immediately. And it triggers if sent from the hand to the grave in any way, even as cost. But you're not able to trigger the effect if sent to the grave as fusion material while on the field, or by being sent from the deck to the grave. But I'd still call this a massive win for the deck, because getting back your normal monsters not only means many more fusions, but more of basically every kind of extra deck summon. It's going to be pretty hard to make Obsidian obsolete. Gemi-Knight Alexandrite is a level 4 rock monster with 1800 attack and 1200 defense, and you contribute this card to special summon a Gemi-Knight normal monster from your deck. This is a good way to filter through specific Gemi-Knights as needed to match up with some fusion monsters, as they require certain specific material, some of which even needing actual specific Gemi-Knights. Now, with that out of the way, does anyone else feel like Alexandrite just collected all the Infinity Stones and is about to snap us all out of existence? Gem-Knight Emerald is a level 4 rock monster with 1800 attack and 800 defense, and you can banish this face-up card you control and a face-up normal monster you control to target a Gem-Knight fusion monster in your grave and special summon it. This gives you a bit of a recovery tool to get back the big fusions you invested into without having to summon a whole new one, though having to banish so many cards could potentially be a problem, cause we kinda want those monsters in the grave to use as fuel for later. Besides, we've got way more revival options now than back in the day, so if you tech an Emerald, you might be showing that you're a little green. Gem-Knight Quartz is a level 4 fairy monster with 1500 attack and defense, and if your opponent controls a monster, you can discard this card to set a fusion continuous spell directly from your deck. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except Gem-Knight monsters. And if this card is used as material for a fusion summon and is either sent to the grave or banished, you can add a Gem-Knight monster from your grave to your hand, except a copy of itself. Now, our targets for fusion continuous spells is a little limited, with only 3 in total. 2 if you consider the fact that Brilliant Fusion is banned. But the targets are pretty strong, so having the ability to access them is amazing. This also fills a similar role to Lazuli, being able to recycle cards when used as fusion material, and even gets you back your Gem-Knight monsters, even the ones that aren't normal. It's a substantially powerful card that'll leave our opponent with no Quartzer. Our next 3 cards are going to be Gemini monsters, so all the usual text applies here. Notably, because we focus on normal monsters in some of our effects, they'll count towards that for purposes of cards like Lazuli and Obsidian, though only in the grave and on the field. Also, don't think I don't see what you did there, developers. Gem-Knights? Well played. Gem-Knight Amber is a level 4 thunder monster with 1600 attack and 1400 defense, and when treated as an effect monster, once per turn, you can send a Gem-Knight card from your hand to the grave to target any of your banished monsters and add that target to your hand. Now, I want to highlight that this can bring back any banished monster, but Gem-Knights aren't known for splashing into other decks very often. But we should keep an eye out for monsters that we splash in that do that. For instance, Rescue Rabbit is a great way to summon multiple Gem-Knight normal monsters at the same time, which just so happens to banish itself directly. Though, that's all predicated on if we ever want to run the Gemini Gem-Knights at all. I'd give this card the big go-ahead if not for the fact that its effect was locked behind an additional normal summon, and that's going to be a recurring theme going down the line. Looks like the double summon didn't make Amber twice as nice. Gemi-Knights is a level 4 aqua monster with 1300 attack and 2000 defense, and once it becomes an effect monster, you can banish a gem monster from your grave to target a Gem-Knight card in your grave and add it to your hand. Note the dash there, very important. That might seem like a strange truncation of the Gem-Knight name, but we do have some cards on the periphery that fit that naming convention that we'll talk about later on. Now, it does say it brings back Gem-Knight cards, but the only non-monster in that category at the moment is Gem-Knight Fusion, so really, it just helps you recover monsters. Something that is, once again, done better by Lazuli and Obsidian because of the Gemini road bump. But they do have a wrist-mounted water boomerang launcher, and that's just cool, so points to them for that. Gem-Knight Sardonyx is a level 4 pyro monster with 1800 attack and 900 defense, and once it becomes an effect monster, when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, you can add a Gem-Knight card from your deck to your hand. Once again, solid effect, especially with that attack stat, though it is hampered by the need to be fed a normal summon before functioning. Now, granted, Geminis probably have a better time at accessing these effects than most themes, thanks to Obsidian's effect freeing up that normal summon by specialing those monsters right to the field. And while the deck isn't really thirsting for a normal summon, though be wary of any Alistair splashing, it's still an obstacle that can get in the way of any potentially splashable normal summons. And trust me, no one hates saying this more than me. This thing's chain flail is hella cool. I'd love to use this more often. But for now, I just can't justify using the old ball and chain. Okay, now we have a few odd ducks. First up are the gem monsters that we mentioned previously. First of which being Gem Armadillo, a level 4 rock monster with 1700 attack and 500 defense, that adds any Gem-Knight monster from your deck to your hand when normal summoned. This allows you to set up just the right materials you need, including getting Lazuli and Obsidian for value. However, because it's not actually name-stamped as a Gem-Knight monster, it does run into some playability issues. Namely, that it's only really good for its normal summon search and little else. Probably got that way because Gem Armadillo got rejected from Crystal Beast auditions, and the Gem-Knights just took pity on it. Gem Turtle is a level 4 rock flip monster with 0 attack and 2000 defense, and its flip effect adds a Gemi-Knight fusion from your deck to your hand. That's the deck's central fusion card, so having a searcher for it is pretty nice, but it's hard to justify playing a flip monster, especially today. As I've stated in previous videos, unless your deck is geared towards actually using flip monsters, you don't have the tools to make them worthwhile. And Gem Turtle is one such example, but we can't keep taking on the failures of the Crystal Beast auditions as part of our theme. I don't even know if quadrupeds are even eligible for knighthood. Gem Elephant is a level 3 rock monster with 400 attack and 1900 defense. During your main phase, you can return this face-up card on the field to the hand. And during damage calculation, if this card attacked or was attacked, you can send a normal monster from your hand to the grave, and this card gains 1000 defense. That first effect part sets it up to look like some kind of honest effect, but it actually just turns normal monsters in your hands into honest specifically for defense, which is pretty weird, and doesn't even give that much of a boost. Like, sure, it can get pretty swole, especially since the stat boost doesn't wear off, but why? You can't even use the Gemini ones in hand for this. A lot of people want to bring up the elephant in the room, but I for one want it to go away. Now. Gem Merchant is a level 3 spellcaster monster with 1000 attack and defense, and during the damage step in either player's turn, when a face-up Earth normal monster you control attacks or is attacked, you can send this card from your hand to the grave, so that monster gains 1000 attack and defense until the end phase. Now, see, this is a battle trick. It just isn't any of our associated types, so it's not going to be used as fusion material. So we're not really getting any extra utility for it, and it only works on normal monsters, so it's only going to be applicable to a small sliver of our roster. Like, I know we haven't talked about them yet, but keep this card in mind when we talk about Topaz or Ruby and how good a boost like this would be. It doesn't even work on Zirconia! I think this merchant might be taking us for a ride. Crystal Rose is a level 2 light rock monster with 500 attack and defense, and once per turn you can send a Gemi-Knight or Melodious monster from your hand or deck to the grave, and if you do, this card's name becomes the sent monster's name until the end phase. And if this card is in your grave, you can banish a fusion monster from your grave to special summon this card in defense position. Now, why in the world does a card support both Gemi-Knights and Melodious? Are the musical mistresses canon to the dual terminal storyline? Well, as your resident lore expert, I can tell you that is not the case. See, in Arc V, there's a trio of students who use themes that come from the dual terminal storyline, and the subject of today's discussion goes by the name Julia Crystal. Very clever. And much like how Aqua gave Earth Crystal Heart, Julia gave Zuzu Boyle Crystal Rose, which somehow imbued it with the ability to assist both players' decks. Thankfully, they're both fusion themes, otherwise they need to do a lot more reworking on this. As for functionality, it actually does a lot for us. It sends Lazuli, and sometimes Obsidian, to the grave to trigger their effects, because thankfully it's part of the effect, not a cost, while taking on the sent monster's name so it becomes a legit member of the theme for fusion summoning purposes. And it also randomly revives itself by banishing a fusion from your grave so you can regain access to it. It certainly rose to the occasion, no doubt about that. But that's not all, because recently they retrained this card into Brilliant Rose, a card that has all the same stats as Crystal Rose, but is crucially always treated as a Gem-Knight card. So now it's just part of the theme, though it's still pretty splashable. You can discard a Gem-Knight or Melodious card to special summon this card from your hand, and once per turn you can send a Gem-Knight or Melodious monster from your extra deck to the grave to have this card's name, type, and attribute become the same as the sent monsters until the end phase. Now, this lacks the ability to trigger Lazuli, but makes up for it in a wider range of stats it can mimic. A few of our fusion cards care about typing, and because this can take on that trait, it becomes a bit more flexible as fusion material. But, I'd be doing you all a disservice if I didn't point out that this can be used for far more nefarious applications. Let's just say that a Brilliant Rose by any other name would still lead to a truckload of burn damage. Alright, that's all of our main deck monsters. Now it's time for the headliners, the fusions. Notably, they must all first be fusion summoned by using their fusion material, so you can't cheat them out of the extra deck onto the field, nor can you use substitute material. But if you can make that material take on the name of that listed material, that's totally fine. Let's start with the ones that require specific Gem-Knights, namely our normals, starting with Gem-Knight Aquamarine, a level 6 Aqua monster with 1400 attack and 2600 defense, requiring Gem-Knight Sapphire and any other Gem-Knight as material. If this card attacks, it's changed to defense position at the end of the battle phase, and when this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can target a card your opponent controls and return that target to the hand. So while it's not a huge offensive threat, you can still get in a poke or two when it's safe while maintaining your big wall. Damn, this really is like a crystal beast. It's also got a cool bounce that, while it has the when templating, is mandatory, so thankfully, it won't miss timing. Not only will this retaliate when it's removed from the field by your opponent, you can force it by using it as link material, and since it must first be fusion summoned, you can use any revival effect to bring it right back out to do it all over again. I'd also like everyone to appreciate that the shell around Aquamarine's helmet looks like Pac-Man. Thank you for your time. Gem-Knight Topaz is a level 6 Thunder monster with 1800 attack and defense, requiring Gem-Knight Tourmaline and any other Gem-Knight monster as material. This card can attack twice during each battle phase, and when this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the grave, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack the destroyed monster has in the grave. That's right, it's a double attacking Flame Wingman. The double attacks don't even have to be on monsters, meaning Topaz represents 3600 points of damage while uncontested. Heck, it represents 3600 points of damage if it destroys 2 attack position monsters in battle. And that amount grows if you manage to slap on any attack bonuses, cause you'll get double the benefits out of it. Honestly, the only things holding this card back is the named material and the low base attack stat. Seriously, can we get a choice band on here? Topaz would make a great sweeper. Gem-Knight Ruby is a level 6 Pyro monster with 2500 attack and 1300 defense, and once per turn you can tribute a face-up gem monster, and this card gains attack equal to the tributed monster's attack on the field until the end phase, and it also deals piercing battle damage. This makes Ruby a kind of complement to Topaz. They're the lightning round that can deal with multiple monsters and slather on the burn damage, while Ruby can deal with bigger threats while maintaining offensive momentum, even through defense position monsters. Top it all off with some sharp and striking visual design, and it's no wonder why I prefer a Ruby version over Sapphire. Gem-Knight Lady Lapis Lazuli is a level 5 rock monster with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, and while I would love to make the Monarch stat joke, no member of the Royal Hierarchy would be caught dead associating with a member of the extra deck. Once per turn, you can send a Gem-Knight monster from your main or extra deck to the grave, and if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each special summoned monster on the field. What's extra spicy about this is that sending the Gem-Knight to grave is, again, part of the effect, not cost, so be ready to trigger more copies of Lazuli. Now, there is a restriction here where you can only special summon Gem-Knight Lady Lapis Lazulis one time per turn, so you're not able to summon multiple in the same turn unless you do so simultaneously, which would take advantage of the fact that that burn effect is a soft once per turn, but you don't have to summon Lady Lapis Lazuli multiple times to actually FTK your opponent. As we cover more of the roster, we'll encounter more and more ways to absolutely goozle your opponent with burn damage, something I'm sure isn't very ladylike. Next up, we have a few fusions that require types of monsters rather than specific Gem-Knights. You can use those previously stated normals, but the Gemini Gem-Knights work here as well. Oh, and they also must first be fusion summoned, but because they don't have any specific material, they don't have that clause. First is Gem-Knight Amethyst, a level 7 Aqua monster with 1950 attack and 2450 defense, requiring a Gem-Knight and an Aqua monster as material. When this card is sent from the field to the grave, return all set spells and traps on the field to the hand. So this feels particularly like a fusion bridge. Its stats aren't necessarily very good, so all its utility is bundled up in its leave the field effect. And being able to bounce set back row is nice, so you don't have to worry about a counter trap hitting you down the line, but is underwhelming in every other situation, which is a lot of situations. Sorry Amethyst, but the wrist-mounted water gun can only get you so far. Now go brush up on your hydraulics and we'll talk later. Gem-Knight Citrine is a level 7 Pyro monster with 2200 attack and 1950 defense, requiring a Gem-Knight monster and a Pyro monster as material. And if this card attacks or is attacked, your opponent can't activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. So we have an Armades on our hands. I just wish the attack stat was better. Now, I've said this about a lot of monsters in the theme, and it probably won't be the last. And to be fair, 2200 is more than enough to deal with most monsters with floating effects. The problem is that it's not strong enough to stand toe-to-toe against other offensive threats. Seriously, Citrine is the combination of Gem-Knight nobility and Laval brutality. Having such a mid-attack stat isn't very on firebrand. Gem-Knight Prismara is a level 7 Thunder monster with 2450 attack and 1400 defense, requiring a Gem-Knight monster and any Thunder monster as material. And once per turn, you can send a Gem-Knight card from your hand to the grave to target a face-up card on the field and destroy that target. This is arguably one of our best fusions in terms of raw utility. You just pitch a card to pop a card, easy as that. Now, this does count as cost, so you can't trigger Lazuli, but remember, Obsidian doesn't really care, so it'll trigger for a free summon regardless. And we do have another card coming up that's very good at returning to our hand over and over again, so finding fuel for this won't be an issue. You could say it's shockingly good. Gem-Knight Lady Rose Diamond is a level 8 fairy monster with 2700 attack and 2400 defense, requiring a Gem-Knight and a fairy monster as material. Notably, it doesn't have the must first be fusion summoned clause, but this is one of our newer cards, so it makes sense the restriction would be a bit more lax. While on the field, the first time any of your Gem-Knight monsters you control would be destroyed by card effect during your opponent's turn, it is not. And when your opponent activates a monster effect during your turn, as a quick effect, you can banish a Gem-Knight card from your grave, then target a face-up card your opponent controls, and destroy it. This one is kind of a mixed bag. Like, I just said how modern this card is, but it's got protection and interaction that could have been printed when the theme premiered, and still just be okay. Honestly, the best thing about this card is how its fusion material can be leveraged by your fusion spells, which isn't an ideal position to be in, but it's better than nothing. And to be fair, later on in the video, I'll cite Lady Rose Diamond as fitting in specifically well with certain cards. But, you know, I'll take Discourse over Rose Diamond over Rose Quartz any day of the week because that fandom can be a lot. And then there's Gem-Knight Zirconia. They're a level 8 rock monster with 2900 attack and 2500 defense, requiring a Gem-Knight and a rock monster as material, and that's about it. It doesn't have any restrictions on them like the rest of the fusions, so this is a true blue non-effect monster. So if you ever want to build Gem-Knight Tenyies, then this is a card you can fuse into that's not going to get in the way of your spirits. I feel like it should also have some synergy with Cubics, but I haven't quite puzzled that one out yet. Now, this one's a little off the rails. Instead of needing a type for its fusion material, it needs an attribute. Gem-Knight Seraphinite is a level 5 fairy monster with 2300 attack and 1400 defense, requiring a Gem-Knight and a light monster as material. And while on the field during your main phase, you can normal summon or set in addition to your usual normal summon set that turn. Ooh yeah, a double summon, pretty cringe, right? But as it turns out, this card is super busted, though not by itself. We'll get to Brilliant Fusion eventually, but keep in mind that this was one of the best and most widely used targets for that card, as it could supplement almost any deck's playstyle, because for some reason, it didn't limit the kind of monster you could use that extra normal summon on. However, considering the fact that we have Gemini monsters in our ranks, I wouldn't be surprised if it was made to help them reach their full potential, which they normally wouldn't be able to reach. Alright, now we have some big boss monsters to cover, starting with Gem-Knight Master Diamond, a level 9 rock monster with 2900 attack and 2500 defense, requiring any 3 Gem-Knight monsters as material, and must first be fusion summoned. This card gains 100 attack for each gem monster in your grave, and once per turn, you can banish a level 7 or lower Gem-Knight fusion monster from your grave, and until the end phase, this card's name becomes that monster's, and you replace this effect with that monster's original effects. This gives Master Diamond an unreasonable amount of reach in its capabilities. It can take on Topaz's double attack and burn, Ruby's incredible damage dealing potential and piercing, Citrine's Armade's effect, or Prismara's removal, and the more gems you have in grave, the more powerful Master Diamond becomes. What? The most powerful one you can copy is, of course, Gem-Knight Lady Lapis Lazuli. See, you can only special summon that monster once per turn. But with Master Diamond, you can copy that effect and use it again to cause another huge chunk of damage. In fact, to limit the power of the FTK, Master Diamond is currently limited in the TCG. They couldn't let this big burn engine trigger multiple times in a single turn, though that still hasn't stopped the engine from working. Because when they put their minds to it, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that want to make sure their opponent don't get to play the game can accomplish anything. And that's why Junior Journey is so popular. God bless you, Guardian Sphinx. Gem-Knight Lady Brilliant Diamond is a level 10 rock monster with 3400 attack and 2000 defense, requiring 3 Gem-Knight monsters as material, and must first be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials. And Lady Brilliant Diamond can only be special summoned once per turn, like Lapis Lazuli. And once per turn, you can send a face-up Gem-Knight monster you control to the grave, and if you do, special summon a Gem-Knight fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring summoning conditions. And would you look at that, sending that Gem-Knight to grave is part of the effect, so keep a lookout for opportunities to use Lazuli with this. Lady Diamond is a great way to cheese out any of the Gem-Knight fusions from your extra deck without needing to get all the little bits and bobs together. You can even get Master Diamond, which might seem like doing extra steps for no reason, since they both have the same fusion material requirements. But if you're able to use a different Gem-Knight, then you can get 2 giant beat sticks for the price of 1 and some change. That's a minimum of 6,300 points of damage, so even if the FTK doesn't work, that can still be lethal after only a little bit of Lapis Lazuli burn. With that much brutality, Lady Brilliant really puts the die in Diamond. But as far as our extra deck monsters go, we're actually not done, as they also made some brief forays into other monster super types. First off, we've got Gem-Knight Pearl, a rank 4 Rock Xyz monster with 2600 attack and 1900 defense, requiring any 2 level 4 monsters as material. And much like Zirconia, is also a non-effect monster, so its utility only goes so far as being a Gem-Knight and having more attack than your average rank 4 without any explicit drawbacks or requirements. It's a fine monster, don't get me wrong, but I do have a preference once again, as I think it pales in comparison to Diamond version. Gem-Knight Phantom Quartz is a Link 2 rock monster with 1450 attack, requiring any 2 gem monsters as material. If Link summoned, you can add a Gem-Knight card from your deck to your hand, and you can pay 1000 life points to fusion summon a Gem-Knight fusion monster from your extra deck by shuffling material in your possession listed on it into your deck that are either banished or in your grave. But that monster can't attack directly this turn. Wow, this card is incredible, no doubt about it. Not only do you get the free Gem-Knight card, which can itself be a card that can help with fusing, it has a built-in parallel world fusion that gets you a big monster while recycling material. They're an amazing extender that really brings the deck together, and you can tell that Phantom Quartz is out for Phantom Blood. Alright, that's all the monsters, now it's time for our spells and traps, a very important aspect for most fusion decks. And no spell is more important than our signature spell, Gem-Knight Fusion, a normal spell card that fusion summons a Gem-Knight fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or side of the field as material. And if this card is in your grave, you can banish a Gem-Knight monster from your grave to add this card to your hand. And it's not once per turn, so as long as you've got Knights in grave to feed it, you can keep putting this card back in your hand. This can lead to a huge chain of summoning where you make a fusion, banish one of its material to get back the spell, play it again, and repeat the process over and over again until you're awash in a sea of purple cards. I'm telling you, it's a real gem. Absorb Fusion is a normal spell card that adds any Gem-Knight card from your deck to your hand, then you can apply the following effect. Fusion summon a Gem-Knight monster from your extra deck by banishing material from your hand or side of the field. However, you can't special summon monsters the turn you activate this card, except Gem-Knight monsters. So, technically, this is a reinforcement of the army that comes with an extra fusion effect, though at the cost of banishing the material. The other drawback is that it checks your summons before and after you activate Absorb Fusion, so you really are limited to only using this in pure Gem-Knight lists. And even then, it kinda sucks to lose material to banish from your grave for Gem-Knight Fusion. Not to mention you miss out on triggering Lazuli and Obsidian. However, I should mention that this does synergize with Gem-Knight Quartz, because it triggers on being banished when used as fusion material. There is also the option of just searching a card and foregoing the fusion summoning. After all, there's a lot you can do and it can get too much. Sometimes, it's best to keep it simple and not get too absorbed in your work. Particle Fusion is a normal spell card that sends, from your field to the grave, fusion materials listed on a Gem-Knight fusion monster card, then special summons that fusion monster from your extra deck. And this is treated as a fusion summon. So I'm not entirely sure why it couldn't just be a fusion summon, but okay. When you do this, you banish this card from your grave to target a Gem-Knight fusion material used for that fusion summon, and the fusion summoned monster gains that monster's attack until the end phase. This is mandatory, so you can't save this for later, but it's mostly harmless. For you, at least. By giving up the ability to use material in the hand, you give your monster a bit of a power boost for a turn. And that can be quite substantial. For instance, if you summon Ruby, you can target the Garnet material and make Ruby a 4400 attack monster before it even uses its own boost. You can also use it on Topaz, targeting Tourmaline, to make it a 3400 attack double attacker. True, it's not very convenient, but if you need a big boost, this can be a big particle of your victory. Brilliant Fusion is a continuous spell that, when activated, fusion summons a Gem-Knight monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your deck as material, but change its attack and defense to 0. If this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. And once per turn, you can discard a spell card, and the monster special summoned by this effect gains attack and defense equal to its original attack and defense until the end of your opponent's turn. So it's a really weird Shaddoll fusion that always uses material from your deck, which was why it was so bad to hard draw the Garnet, and as it turns out, adding Foolish Burials to your fusion summoning is a great way to cheat costs and get a lot of benefits. And this was most prevalent in basically every deck that wasn't Gem-Knights. By playing the DZ patented Gem-Knight Garnet, you could send it and any light monster from your deck to the grave to get a level 5 double summoning enabler that could be used as material later on in the turn. And if you had a spare spell, could also add to your team's push for game. And among the light targets you could choose from, Fairy Tale Snow was easily the best, as you could splash it in even if your deck didn't normally run light monsters. In fact, I can attest that I was playing this card big time in Madolches as a way to get more Mageline triggers, set up Angelian Hoot Cake, then using Seraphonite as material for a Choco a la mode. It would even see play in Thunder Dragons. However, they'd make Prismara, because not only could you send any Thunder from deck to grave, regardless if it was light or dark, it also made for a great fusion that you could feed into the Summon of Titan. Despite that though, I still think the card would be legal today, as it is powerful, but requires a lot of build around to make work. The issue is, as I've stated previously, the Gem-Knight FTK. While still doable in its current form, Brilliant Fusion made it much easier to pull off, and thus was banned to limit that strategy's power. But despite its dishonorable discharge, it's impossible to say that it left behind anything but a brilliant legacy. In its place, we now have Scatter Fusion. It's also a continuous spell, though instead of only activating when played, you can activate it during any of your main phases, though only if your opponent controls a monster. You fusion summon any non-rock Gem-Knight monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your deck as material. Also, you can't special summon monsters from your extra deck for the rest of the turn, except Gem-Knight monsters. And when this card leaves the field, destroy all monsters summoned by this card's effect. So you get to do this every turn, but you lose everything you summoned with this if you lose it. Though, if this does happen during your opponent's turn, then Lady Rose Diamond can save you from this, so that's kinda nice. You can also only summon the non-rock fusions, which means no Zirconia, Lady Lapis Lazuli, Master Diamond, or Lady Brilliant Diamond. But you can still make Lady Rose Diamond, which can trigger Quartz, which will in turn essentially add the second material you used for its summon. On the other hand, you can make Seraphonite for that extra normal summon, as well as sending Brilliant and Crystal Rose to the grave. You can also gain access to the Pyro, Thunder, and Aqua fusions, but in today's game, they're probably less useful than they were originally. And while it's not as explosively powerful as Brilliant Fusion, this card has more than enough power to force your opponent's team to scatter. Brilliant Spark is a normal trap card that can be activated if any number of face-up Gem-Knight monsters are destroyed by an opponent's attack or card effect to target one of those destroyed monsters and burn your opponent for damage equal to its original attack. And if this card is in your grave, you can send a Gem-Knight card from your hand to the grave to add this card to your hand. And because you can pitch Gem-Knight Fusion for this, you can basically get Brilliant Spark back in the same way, just with a few extra steps. It's a neat way to dissuade your opponent from running over your stuff. After all, if the damage would be enough to kill your opponent, they don't have much of a choice. But it's not really a searchable card, and since it doesn't do anything on its own, well, you can see why it doesn't spark much interest. Fragment Fusion is a normal trap card that banishes fusion material in your grave listed on a Gem-Knight Fusion monster to special summon a Gem-Knight monster from your extra deck, and this is treated as a fusion summon. However, the monster is destroyed during the end phase. So it's a slower miracle fusion that doesn't let you keep the monster, but that's not all bad. If it's during your turn, you can get away with a lot before it self-destructs, and if it's during your opponent's turn, once again, Lady Rose Diamond is pretty well positioned to help. If we had more on-summon effects, I'd be a lot more excited about this, but at this point it just feels like a fusion effect just to check off a list and say they have a miracle fusion. I'm not really sure how I'm fragment to take this. Gem Enhancement is a normal trap card that has you tributing a Gem-Knight monster, then targeting a Gem-Knight monster in your grave and special summoning that target from the grave. So it lets you trade in one of your Gem-Knights for a better one in your grave, including your fusion since they only need to be fusion summoned first. There are probably better cards nowadays for this though. Back to the Front might summon the monster in defense position, but that's not a -1. But all the better, I can't really advocate for the usage of gem performance enhancing cards. Pyrazine Fusion is a normal trap card that sends, from your hand or side of the field to the grave, fusion materials listed on a Gem-Knight Fusion monster card, then special summon that fusion monster from your extra deck, and this is treated as a fusion summon. Not much to say here, it's basically Gem-Knight Fusion but at spell speed 2 to spring on people unexpectedly. Though we've already gone over how a lack of on-summon or quick effects doesn't really take full advantage of this. But trust me, it isn't anything you haven't Pyrazine before. Alright, that's all the Gem-Knight cards, but what do we do with them? Well, we have a lot of ways to make cheap, efficient, and powerful monsters that can overwhelm our opponent's board state in a variety of ways. We can also just burn them out first thing, but I think you can get away with running a deck with both aspects, using Beatdown as a backup plan in case you get hand-trapped out of that line of play. So what can we play to help them out? Well, first, it might be prudent to define what the heck the Gem-Knight FTK actually is. Basically, the idea is to facilitate a board where you can maximize Lady Lapis Lazuli's damage, so you need to activate them as few times as possible to deal 8k damage. But even if you manage to fill your side of the field with special summoned monsters, the max you could possibly reach is 3k, so we'd need 3 activations, which is kind of rough between one Lady Lapis Lazuli and one Master Diamond. However, it counts all special summoned monsters on the field, and to help with this, we're gonna need a little help from our friend, Black Garden. We'll be going more into what this card does once we reach Akiza Explained, a hint hint 50k, but in short, this card has been a mainstay in silly FTK combos for a while now. Basically, every time you summon a monster, it'll have its battle stats, which is completely irrelevant to what we're looking to do here. Then it gives your opponent a token, which is a special summoned monster. Over the course of the turn, you'll want to summon enough times to fill your opponent's main monster zones with tokens, which will cover 2,500 points of damage. This also helps enable your ability to use Scatter Fusion going first, since they'll now have monsters, which will allow you to activate it. From this point, the goal is to make Phantom Quartz, which will get you a Gem-Knight Fusion, as well as being a way to fuse in and of itself. With the Gem-Knight Fusion, you can make Lady Lapis Lazuli, the required Lapis being pretty easy to find, thanks to Scatter Fusion sending it to the grave so it can be recurred by either Obsidian, Lazuli, or Quartz. Then burning your opponent by sending another copy of itself from your extra deck to the grave. Then you use Phantom Quartz to summon a Master Diamond, banish the other Lapis Lazuli to gain its effect, then presto, that's game. Of course, any number of Veilers, Imperms, Ash Blossoms, and Ghost Bells get in the way of this, so it's good to have a backup plan in case that falls through. But sometimes you'll get a free win just off your opponent opening a crummy hand, and sometimes that's all you need. But now let's move on to some more fair Gem-Knight support cards. And first of all, I'd like to once again direct all of you towards Vernisylphs, because of course I am. My channel might as well be sponsored by Vernisylphs at this point, because it's been an easy include in every Earth deck I've talked about for like a month now. But we also might want to consider the Ishizu cards. More Gem-Knights in grave means more fodder for Gem-Knight Fusion, as well as the occasional Lazuli trigger. And by using Scatter Fusion, you can just send Agito or Kelbeck right to the grave. Super polymerization has been a strong board breaker for formats now, but it's even better in actual fusion decks, and we're no exception. We don't have to deal with restrictions on our opponent's turn, so we can tap into all manner of things like Starving Venom to Garura. But we can take this one step further. There's the usual activate it during battle phase to cheat out another attacker to close out games, but failing that, we can use it to summon Lady Lapis Lazuli on our opponent's turn, if we have Lapis on board for some reason. That way, when it comes around to our turn, we can special summon another L3 and get the double activations to ensure a quick victory. Adamantipator might be a fun splash. While Gemi-Knights have an odd concentration of non-rock monsters, we do have a few, which can open up some fun avenues of synchro summoning. It can also give you a chance to run the Kwakimaru rocks, mainly Guardian, which can help insulate our plays without having to use our normal summon, which is more often than not going to be used up by Armadillo. Oh, and speaking of consistency pieces, any two of our level 4s gives us Gallant Granite, so you can either grab any Gem-Knight you need, or for security purposes, Nibiru, who might I point out is a rock for any rock-related shenanigans, and a light for Seraphonite fusion material. But I know what you little gremlins are really here for, the most exciting part of the tech pick section, Floodgates! Well, with Phantom Quartz's ability to fusion summon from the Banished Zone, we've never been more comfortable with playing the Banishing Floodgates, and guess what? They're all at 3 now! Throw in triple copies of D-Fissure, Macrocosmos, and even Dimension Shifter, and you'll be seeing a huge drop in speed from your opponent. And since Earth is our primary attribute, Gozen Match ain't half bad either. As for a silly tech pick, try to give Dark Calling a try, specifically to make evil hero Dark Gaia. You've already got some pretty strong rocks floating to the bottom of your graveyard pool, so all you need is a Nightmare Link monster for the Fiend, which you can make pretty easily as long as you're not under a summon lock. And at that point, you've got a gigantic monster that can force monsters into attack position to make sure you keep your offensive pressure going smoothly. And a bonus, with the new Dark World structure deck coming out, then you've got some pretty sweet new Super Poly targets. And that's all I have to say about Gemi-Knights. Clearly living the FTK dream is far from a reality, and honestly, I wouldn't want this to be consistent enough to reliably win tournaments. But having that game plan in your back pocket in case things go your way will help give you free wins to supplement a fusion frenzy of a deck. After all, it's only after suffering from immense pressure that you can come out the other end looking like a crazy, crazy diamond. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Gemi-Knights the crown jewel of the format, or do they not make the cut? And if you've made it this far, which Gemi-Knight is your favorite? I know I'm partial to Ruby because I'm a sucker for the color red, and I'd like to hear what yours is as well. And while you're there, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. This episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Julius Sneezer, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Cameron Berg, Chibi Gohan, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Mana Charge, Marluxia is a Girl, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Rem T Bright, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxith Sarani, Sophie, apparently, the Fresh Prince of Conair, the Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Ariel Kersey, Bear Shark Depot Studios, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Emily, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, Jesus Garcia, Kale the Dragon, Carp, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Neo Trinity 7, Nitromo, Sarah Lo Sulci, Shaquille Solomon, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Super Purd, Tucker Ordorn and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, and get all my videos just a little bit early, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the world these cards come from, check out this playlist on my series of the living history of the Dual Terminal. And if you want to see two Yugi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenkinai's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.